Imagine there's a code, a cosmic code, that if you understood it, you could use it to accomplish your goals, have more fun, live a more interesting life, and achieve more easily your mission. It involves something you would never expect, the four elements of nature. You're about to discover that nature's fire, air, water, and earth show us that code in terms that we can all understand. The ancients knew about this code, this four-element pattern. Unfortunately, knowledge about this has been lost to us. The imbalance, chaos, anxiety, and stress of our lives will be lessened as we see things with a four-element perspective. We are suffering because the ancient wisdom is not present in our lives. At the onset of this four-element story, we need to know there is an order to the four. Fire, showing up as nature's sun, is up top. Earth, the hardness under our feet, is at the bottom. Fire and earth are the most polar and represent the most ancient of cosmic opposites. Air and water come next. They are secondary opposites. Picture it like this. Air is composed of more fire, bound with lesser earth. Water is more earth, joined with lesser amounts of fire. And hence we have that order: fire, air, water, and earth. It's important to remember that order. Notice that from the top down, it sounds out as Fa. The Fa elements: fire, air, water, with the E of earth silent.
Increased chaos and imbalance in today's world that is very palpable to most people. We love our technologies, but we know that something isn't quite right. We're becoming lazy, getting fat. We don't walk much or engage in the natural world much either. We're not sure how to create a reasonable, unstressing balance in our lives. The answer to this dilemma we've gotten ourselves into might best be revealed as we come to understand a balance that we each make between the modern and the primitive poles or ideals of our life. The primitive ideal pushes us to notice and appreciate nature, its beauty, its cycles, its productive balance. The modern ideal is that ever new technologies will make us happy. The chaos and imbalance of our collective lives is a consequence of not feeling the urgency of this balancing act. Our smartphones and very much all those other devices of this modern era give us many of the pleasures of our lives. But with that said, we know that there's something deep that's out of balance. And that's where the four elements come in. At the core of nature and its primitive pole are these four elements. Before long, you'll be able to use this code to establish a healthy rhythm in your life, to become more physically engaged and spiritually inspired by the world around you.
I believe that it was Woody Allen who once joked, he said, I think I'm at two with nature. And I find that that's a certain, it's humorous, and it's also perhaps insightful as to the way that many people think about the natural world, that it's other than them. They're kind of conflicted about whether it's a threat or something we need. And maybe perhaps another goal could be to be at one with the elements, to become more at one with the elements, let's say, to move in that direction, even if we're still at two with what we perceive to be nature. Because today it seems, in the ancient and perennial world, you had earth, air, fire, and water. It's almost as if now smog is our new air, that concrete is our new kind of form of earth, that plastic is a kind of new water. You know, it's a malleable substance, but it's everywhere in the ocean, threat to marine life and to our own life. And that fire is, well, I don't know, silicon. It's something, you know, technological, and we rarely see fire, that nobody rarely builds a fire unless you're camping, or a lot of stoves, you don't see it, or we don't light our candles at the end of the day. So maybe bringing these elements back into our everyday world is a start. Become aware of the soil, of the air, of the literally the flame and the fire, or the water that isn't only bottled water, but the water that comes from the stream. And if we add a fifth element, perhaps the ether, the fifth element of the ancients and Aristotle, is now kind of cyberspace or hyperspace, right? That it's been transformed. So bringing the elements back into our everyday experience, they're both extraordinary in terms of their qualities, in terms of their effects on the world. They've had a huge effect on our cultural, intellectual, and artistic and philosophical histories, but they're also everyday, they're ordinary. And I think recalling that is and can be helpful to us. There's a remark by the American writer Henry Beston, who wrote numerous books, but one of them was called The Outermost House, where he spent a year on the shore in New England. And he says, "The world today is sick to its thin blood for lack of elemental things, for fire before our hands, for water welling from the earth, for air, for the dear earth itself underfoot." So hopefully we can begin to, if not cure that sickness, and move in more healthy, humane, and ecological ways in the future.
One formulation is space-time. We all know that space is three-dimensional. You need three numbers to specify exactly where a point in space is. But since Albert Einstein's inauguration of the theory of relativity, his special theory of relativity, which began in 1905, we've realized that time is the fourth dimension, and that the laws of nature are best expressed as four relationships. We not only have the foursome of space and time, we have the foursome of momentum and energy. Energy is the fourth element for the foursome of momentum. The momentum energy four vector. All the equations that involve energy, force, momentum, angular momentum, as well as linear momentum, all those relations are most neatly and beautifully expressed and elegantly expressed as four equations. And usually the four equations are relations that depend on space-time, the space-time point that you're talking about, the instant and the location of the object. That's perhaps the most prominent of the foursomes in physics. There are others. We have four forces in nature. We're all familiar with the gravitational force that makes objects fall to the earth. It's responsible for the fact that the earth goes around the sun, the moon goes around the earth. We're all familiar with the electromagnetic force. Just about all of modern technology has as its key the use of the electromagnetic force. But there are two other forces, completely separate forces. The strong force that keeps the nucleus together, it binds the various elements of the nucleus called nucleons, it binds them together. And there's a fourth force called the weak force, which is responsible for important radioactivity, the beta decay of radioactivity, the breakup of the nucleus, that's governed by the weak force. Yes, states of matter is another foursome. Sometimes you hear that there are three states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. But there are really four prevalent states of matter. The plasma has to be added into that. The sun, all stars are plasmas as examples. So we have four prevalent states of matter that we can find in the universe, and that's another foursome that happens to occur in the subject of physics.
The four-element system has a great deal, obviously, to do with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is a structure whose symmetries are trivial. You can't really do anything with just one point. But it is the beginning of something which exists. We can't even distinguish it from non-existence, but it's there. Now we can imagine radiating out from that one point in some intrinsic sense to give us two directions, to give us a line that is extending in two directions. And with the symmetries that are available to us there, we now have the possibility of drawing distinctions. So we can talk about one thing being not another thing. We can make a geometric structure here that begins to be interesting. We have the two directions can either be thought of as being connected to each other or not. The two directions as symmetries, the two directions can be identified with the do-nothing symmetry and the symmetry that swaps the two directions. There's what we call in mathematics an isomorphism between the fact that we have two directions and that we have two symmetries. The directions can be identified with the two possible symmetries regarding those two directions. So now we can distinguish between existence and non-existence. We can distinguish between this and that. Now, with a structure, with a geometric structure such as the one that we get by regarding these 2 points as and the connectivity, the symmetric connectivity relation between them, that each is connected to the other, we can do what in mathematics is known as one-point compactification. That's a fancy way of adding a third point and connecting it to the radiating ends of the line that is implicitly there as that first point divides into the possibility of having a separation and therefore distinctions. The two ends come together in the one-point compactification to create a third point, and we can pick arbitrarily, without changing the structure at all, 2 points on the original line that resulted from the radiation from that one original point. We can pick 2 points on that line to bend that line at those 2 points and thereby create a triangle. Now with a triangle with 3 points, we suddenly have an explosion of possibilities for drawing complex and subtle distinctions, making complex structure. We need to extend those triangles into structures that give us the same power and strength in higher dimensions. We don't, after all, live in flatland. We live in space-time, which is even 4-dimensional. And so by being able to add a 4th point to the 3 that gives us triangles, that gives us the 3 combinators, and adding that, we don't actually have to, but the optimal choice is to add that at right angles to the plane defined by the first 3 points, right angles to that triangle. We get the strength and power that results from a tetrahedron. And from there, we can in fact construct the whole of space-time. This has actually been mathematically carried out and simulated on a computer by a group of mathematical physicists using what are called oriented tetrahedra. They combine in ways like Lego building blocks to build the space-time of Einstein.
The highest of the 4 elements is the fire element. That's the first element that relates to the sun. And just remember how the sun radiates out that oneness energy. That first principle of oneness is actually the light energy that plants take in and create through photosynthesis carbohydrates and the biochemistry of life. And the reason I mention that is what the fire principle is about is order. So all these biochemical compounds are really this order energy that life creates to create higher order within itself. But more than that, what we're getting to right now is the nervous system is an expression of this fire principle as well. So just as you have the earth being the bones of the body that end up strong at the feet, The nerves of the body are high up here, so strong in our brain. The cerebral cortex in particular is a powerful place where the fire element of life is within us as human beings. Now when we're stressed out, when we're anxious, when we're nervous, those are all expressions of the fire element not being properly used by us. So what we need to do as human beings is find ways for that nervous system, that fire element energy, to move through us unimpeded. As it turns out, chiropractors like myself have always been useful to helping nerve energy flow through them. So pinched nerves, where nerves are irritated by the bones and in other parts of the body, cause that nerve energy to be dampened up and irritated and lacking the ability for it to do what it's supposed to do for the life of each of us. So if you want a healthy life, you want the nerves working for you. You want them doing what they're supposed to do for the heart, which is very nervous system driven. For all the parts of the body, all that need nerve energy depend upon that flow of nerve energy through the spine, outward, organizing, ordering the organ that it's going to.
Now, let's move to water. Think about the way life began, as small amoeba in the ancient seas. Nourishment was carried into each by water flowing in and out of its cell. As life got bigger, channels developed to transport those nutrients throughout a larger cell. Later yet in evolution, a digestive system took shape to break down food so that each cell could get its needed nutrients. Eventually, a heart would develop to pump blood, filled with those nutrients. By then, a whole circulatory system had formed, even an immune system to keep those internal waters free of parasites. And kidneys developed to filter the water circulating through those arteries and veins. And then life moved on to land. Oxygen that was dissolved in the oceans now needed lungs to draw it out of the air. The point is this: all of your organs, urinary, respiratory, digestive, immune, and cardiovascular, are an embellishment of this water element system within your body. All are ultimately about sustaining your own water element, that red river of blood within you. And literally feeding into this river is what you eat. It is with the foods you eat, the spices you use, the hot and cold beverages you might drink, that this heart-pumped river within you, your water element, is kept strong. As the four-element way of thinking is extended into the practical matter of having more energy and improving health, eating wholesome foods and drinking more wholesome beverages is clearly a smart thing to do.
Well, let's think about what water is as a chemical. Of course, it's H2O. That's one way of speaking about it, and that's the basic chemical architecture of it. But water also has a number of interesting properties. Among them is the ability of water to form what are called hydrogen bonds, that is, weak links between multiple water molecules. And that's what gives water the cohesiveness that it needs to be a fluid. Now, water can exist either as air or as liquid, after all, because we have water vapor in the air. It's the same elements, but how it's different in the liquid form is that the water is held into this extremely cohesive state of matter that we call a liquid. Now, when it comes to how life interacts with that, remember that what's happening here is you have energy coming in the form of a sun, and that energy is being used by living things to mobilize matter to store that energy into something that could be used to power life, basically, in this case, glucose. And one of the things that is behind that ability to mobilize matter is the cohesive, continuous environment that is water. On Earth, life must exist in water. That's just all there is to it. And if you look at the limits of where life exists on the Earth, it's almost always whether water can be organized in such a way to help convey matter into living systems to enable them to capture this energy to make glucose. So water is extremely important in the ability of connecting energy with the flows of matter that go behind living systems, and so it's very, very important that way. And there are some other properties. For example, water is unique among the liquids, in that when it freezes, it becomes less dense than in its liquid form. This is why ice floats. It enables lots of things to be dissolved in it that might not be possible to dissolve in other kinds of liquids, for example. And again, that's part of the mobilization of the ability of water to mobilize matter to help it flow into living systems and organize them. And so that's really, from my perspective, where water comes in. Where it fits into the whole four-element thing, that's a very interesting question, because the four-element model of matter that the Greeks have bequeathed us is really motivated by a fundamental observation of what these philosophers thought life is. And the metaphor of balance was very, very important to, for example, the development of Hippocratic medicine. You had these opposing forces. You had fire versus earth and water versus air, and you could, of course, connect lines of opposition in different ways. But the thing about the four-element system was that this notion of balance was very, very important to their definition of what life is. Now, that metaphor for balance has carried over through into modern biology, so it's still there. It's expressed in a different way, but we're still grappling with the notion of just what that balance is. What is it that is being played off what else to be able to ensure that you have the continuity through time that characterizes a living system. At the heart of our definition of life is this tendency of a balance or an opposition between two opposing tendencies. And so from my perspective, for example, the remarkable thing about life is its persistence through time. I'm a different person materially than I was a month ago in terms of, the actual atoms that comprise me, for example. They're different now than they were a month ago. And yet here I am. I still look pretty much the same. I'm functioning the same. And so any living system persists in form and function through time. But in terms of thermodynamics, any ordered system like that is going to be continuously degrading. And so that's one tendency. We have a tendency to degrade, to decay, and those sorts of things. And what enables us to persist in time is the ability to do work to be able to create a specified orderliness as fast as it degrades. And so that's one way of thinking about the notion of balance. And water, of course, fits into this, because water is the medium whereby the work is done to bring matter together in order to create the specified orderliness that is a living system, and to create it as fast as it degrades. And you can see this opposition at work if a living system dies. What happens when the system dies is that the work that's being done to create order is now no longer being done. And of course, we all know the outcome of that. Decay takes over, and the body degrades and decomposes. And the only reason that we don't see that going on all the time at us is that because we are actually, living systems are actually doing work to be able to create that order. And again, because life lives in a water medium, the water is the medium whereby all the materials and all the matter that goes into creating a living system is mobilized by energy to be able to create that order. So that's where water really fits in.
Air as an element is space, is the force that creates open, endless space. Everything needs its elbow room, this space. And what is it that we use that gives us this elbow room? Our muscles. Muscles move us through space, air, to do the things we want to do. In the holistic way that the cosmos works, it even makes sense that the air we breathe contains oxygen, which is what muscular power requires. The way we use our muscles defines how we do what we do, how we live. If you habitually have bad posture, walk slump forward, or, as many of us do, sit too much, you are not using your muscles properly. When you don't use your muscles in the way they were meant to be used, you are not honoring this air circuit of your body. Acupuncture calls this air element energy Qi. Qi is the robust, invigorating power that keeps life strong. It's what gives each of us our level of self-empowerment. We each generate this Qi as we use our muscles. And indeed, staying active and having good muscle invigorative posture are all time-honored notions of how to live a healthy, robust life.
Interesting things happen as you begin to see your body in terms of the 4 elements. The earth element, for example, are your bones. Like earth, your bones are hard. Still, while all your bones have that earth in them, can you sense how your feet have more of it? The feet are at the very earth bottom of all your bones. And looking at those feet, can you see how each heel is its earthmost part? It's with our heels that our feet engage the ground most intensely. Here's something interesting to know. Scientists tell us that optimally, when each heel hits the ground, an electrical current is created. This electrical current travels up your leg and stimulates more bone to be made to counter the body's normal breakdown of bone. That's why postmenopausal women are especially told to walk. It's somewhat poetic. When the earth in you, your bones, engage the greater earth below you as you walk, the earth in you, those bones, become stronger. But it is more than your bones that become stronger. Even mentally, you become like earth, more sturdy. This mental and physical sturdiness is given to all who properly engage the earth principle of nature. Unfortunately, we've softened our heel strikes through the cushioning of sneakers and our other modern footwear. They're so very much different than the sandals and hard leather shoes of most humans until about 50 years ago. The irony of our times is that as little as most of us walk, we unwittingly dampen that heel strike by the softness of the shoes we wear today. Many of us are anxious in part because we are losing the sturdiness that is meant to come as we walk each day. We are becoming soft. Here's a 4-element tip. While traditional leather shoes are best, with any shoe, you can draw earth life-positive energies into you by focusing on the back half-inch of each heel as you walk. It helps to flex that foot's toes upward as the back half-inch of the heel strikes.
The green chemistry, the chemical elements, in some ways are gifts. They allow us to create all kinds of drugs and benefits for the human, but they also are a danger because this is, again, the dual nature of fire and the use of technology. Green chemistry, uses the periodic table to create biodegradable commodities to live in a more sustainable world, and that's a relatively new area. And I think an important pedagogical or educational development that could take off is just teaching children about the elements, because they encounter, again, not H2O initially, but water. They like to play in water. They like to play in dirt. They like to go flying. Who doesn't like to fly? The closest I've gotten to flying was in a hang glider, and I felt, wow, I'm experiencing air in a way I don't experience the currents of the wind on ground. I actually got to fly the glider myself. The point is, it's important to not just think about the 4 elements, but to work with them, encounter them. There's a book recently, it's called Last Child into the Woods, and it's about what the author calls nature deficit disorder. A lot of children, a lot of adults are only dealing with iPhones and cars and computers, and it's sometimes good to kind of put those down and encounter this like original, less mediated, more kind of primal world of earth, air, fire, water, cloud, ice, snow, shadow, etc. if we enlarge the canonical fourfold to include these other elemental entities, and to get your hands dirty, to get your feet wet, so to speak, and to see what you learn, and maybe again to move from the sense of kind of elemental beauty to elemental duty, even to elemental policy, so that we have ecological protections for some of this world that's arguably under assault.
If it's true, and there seems to be a lot of evidence accumulating that groups of four are central to understanding our universe, then it's possible that the four element formulations may play a big role in understanding some of the mysteries in science today. Much of the public doesn't realize how little we understand about the universe. It's estimated that 95% of the universe is not understood. Dark matter is more prevalent than the everyday matter that we see around us. Dark energy is another mystery that we have very little understanding of. And dark matter and dark energy constitute 95% of the universe. It's possible that by considering groups of four, that progress may be made in understanding these two very important unsolved problems in science.
The four elements also manifest in important parts of our human condition that relate to philosophy, science, religion, and technology. Let's see how they do this. So the fire element is the highest of the four elements, and in the same way that philosophy is the highest part of our human condition as well. Whether we know it or not, we each have a philosophy, and we're meant to have a philosophy that brings us up as opposed to down. Unfortunately today, we have more of a materialistic philosophy, an earth element kind of philosophy, as opposed to a fire element philosophy. So part of a four element lifestyle is to have a philosophy that has a fire element oneness concept embedded in it. Because that oneness that we're part of is meant to impel us, to inspire us to live a good life. So part of having a four element lifestyle is to have a good philosophy, a spiritual philosophy, if you will. The next one down is science. Science is the air element. And again, think of science as related to that intellect of air that cuts things into smaller and smaller tunenesses to figure out how things work. So science is about the howness, the air element of the human condition. So science is the collective intellect, the collective air element faculty within the human condition. The water element, the whyness, is the religion, the poetics, the romance of life. That romance and poetic nature of life is tied into the water element that we learned about earlier, which is about the whyness of water's hydrogen bond that makes life possible. We all have to have a passion that the water element embellishes within us to give us the oomph and the passion to do the higher level things that we want to do. Now, religion can be thought of as this. Religion is the fire element, the sun's fire element being refracted by water into the religious ethnic traditions of the human condition. So in other words, the water element is the religious traditions of the human condition that make life beautiful for the humankind. It's the families of humankind are all diverse aspects of life that the water principle gives to humankind. The earth element, technology, is how we physically, collectively manifest these scientific things that we've learned to make life present and productive. That's all part of the earth element, to be productive in a physical way through technology. So materialism and the productivity of materialism is really an earth element agency or faculty within us. But the point I want to make here is that we're all meant to move upward from earth to fire. We all know that up is the direction we're meant to move. So the four element inspired lifestyle tells us that we want to move upward, away from the fracture of religious infighting, and realize that we're all part of a higher level oneness. This oneness of a spiritual philosophy helps us to move beyond a fractured humankind toward a higher level one. And that's what's going to make this world better, as more and more people realize that the four elements can give us the key that we need to live a balanced, productive life.
Each layer of the cosmos has these four playing out in it. This fire, air, water, earth pattern spells out the sacred unity of the cosmos, even as this foursome becomes responsible for building the diversity of our world as they interact in almost endless ways. Nature's sun, air, water, and earth help us to see, engage, and understand these four most ancient cosmic principles. Each of the four elements is endowed with a spiritual force and conveys values and life-empowering energies to us. In this physical world, the essential spiritual oneness that the fire principle speaks about shows up as our sun. Indeed, light is created as four hydrogen atoms are fused to create one helium. Light truly is a oneness energy, generated as this nuclear fusion occurs in our sun and all its fellow stars. And air nature takes the space between those arrows of two and fills it with molecules of air, which, interestingly enough, is composed of O2, N2, H2. And water, its H2O, comes as the hydrogen from one's realm, combines with the oxygen from the realm of two, forging this three-built molecule. Water truly does embody with its properties that triangular principle of interconnectedness. And Earth. It's important to know of something that chemists speak about, electron valences, related to the number of electrons in an atom's outer shell. These valences give each of the elements of the periodic table many of their important properties. Carbon, the physical building block of life, and silicon, the backbone of our planet, as granite rock, quartz, and sand, both have four as their electrical valence. The point is this: the four elements express a logical, number-based pattern that is not only poetic and spiritual, but also scientifically noticed. As you will see, very practical in how we can apply this pattern to our lives. So many interesting things happen when we use nature's four elements as a Rosetta Stone to understand how our body, nature, and the greater cosmos works. So what would a four-element inspired lifestyle look like? It would be more spiritual in a natural kind of way. That's because you'd be seeing the sun, air, water, and earth as the expression of those four cosmic spiritual principles, as oneness was fractured into four parts. You would find practical ways to draw the power of each of these four into your life. You would heel strike better, perhaps forsaking those soft shoes that make up our footwear today. Besides helping to align your body parts better, you'd notice this mind-steadying earth energy to be a good antidote for the anxieties and mental stress that many feel today. You would become sturdier in body, mind, and spirit as you translated more of the earth principle into yourself with each heel strike. And the water principle's force, it would find its way into you as you understood food, spices, and herbs in deeper ways. A four-element inspired lifestyle would have you eating more wholesome foods and drinking a variety of herbal teas and other beverages that contain nature's life-positive principles. As you drank your morning's coffee, you'd get a chuckle out of realizing that coffee is our nation's herb of choice, caffeine being one of coffee's herbal principles. In the same way that air moves upward, a four-element inspired lifestyle would have you being drawn upward. We are meant to become continuously smarter as we do so, as we learn about new ideas, including these four cosmos-spanning principles. A four-element inspired lifestyle would inspire you to have a sport, martial art, a physical activity, a yoga that helped you draw air's muscular energy into you. These would help you to stay robust and filled with chai. And the fire principle, it would prod you to meditate, envision your goals, develop a philosophy, to feel the oneness light of the sun as it shines on a cool day. It is this fire principle that helps you feel part of something larger than yourself, and to maintain your idealism amidst the troubles of the world. The four-element story lives through each of us, and indeed, whether we know it or not, we are each on a four-element journey. May the four elements and their life-positive ideals, values, and energies always be strong in your life. And perhaps may they motivate you to join with others, to find ways to better balance life's principles, ideals, and energies here in this small, beautiful part of the cosmos that nature's four elements have created for us.